Welcome to Free Thoughts. I'm Aaron Powell.
And I'm Patrick Eddington.
And joining us today is Joshua Childress. He's a former Border Patrol agent. Welcome to the show, Joshua.
Thanks for having me.
How'd you end up working for the Border Patrol?
In 2010, I was on a military training exercise with the National Guard, and one of the guys that was attached to my platoon was a Border Patrol agent, and I was kind of floundering in college, not really sure what I wanted to continue studying. And he said, "Hey, we're hiring. Might be something you like doing. We get to go, they give us guns. We get to go chase people through the desert. It's exciting, fun." And I thought, oh, okay. I have a background in the military. So I filled out the application online and just kind of forgot about it. And then it's a really lengthy process. You hear nothing for 6-8 months, and then they call you and, hey, go do this, go do a physical, go do, talk to this investigator. So after about a year and a half, I finally got a job offer, and I thought, well, it pays better than going into more student loan debt. So I took the job and went to the Border Patrol Academy in Artesia, New Mexico in 2011.
So what sort of stuff, like you go through that and then you start on the job, what kind of stuff are you doing?
The academy's almost 6 months long. And then after you complete the academy, there's about 4 months of on-the-job training. So you're not really cut loose to go do work yet. You're shadowed by a field training officer. And so you're kind of you're on a leash, but you're getting out there in the actual environment and seeing how things go. But you're under pretty tight supervision for that first year. And then after a year, you're essentially, you know your area, and you're essentially let loose to go enforce the laws. So a typical day, we would, wherever you're assigned to go patrol, if it's not on the border, it's near the border, and you have these roads that you patrol, and you essentially look for footprints. I mean, that's your bread and butter, is you're looking for either footprints or, sign of a vehicle entry into the country. And then if you find something like that, you just track it kind of like a hunter. And
then you just arrest the people as you find them, put them in detention.
Yeah, once you catch, if you detect foot sign and you track it, once you catch up to them, it's pretty informal, but I mean, the official thing is you're supposed to establish alienage. So for a gringo like me, my broken Spanish, I'm able to ask, what country their citizenship is. And once we establish alienage, then you place them under arrest, take them back to the station, and set them up for processing.
What kind of people are you finding out there? I mean, you listen to the rhetoric coming from our president, and it's almost entirely rapists and MS-13 members and MS-13 members who are rapists. How accurate is that?
So when I first hit the ground running, when I first got out of probationary status and was, an official agent at that point.
And assigned to where? What sector?
The Yuma, Arizona, Yuma station of Yuma sector. So we're right there on the southwest corner of the state of Arizona, patrolling anywhere from the Imperial Sand Dunes in California to the Gila Mountains over by the Agua Prieta Wildlife Refuge. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between who we're catching. So when I started out, everybody's talking about, we're out there, we're catching bad guys, these are lawbreakers, and so anytime somebody was caught and they'd been caught before and say they, killed somebody in a drunk driving accident or manslaughter or rape or, assault with a deadly weapon, these are fairly common things. Well, when we would find somebody like that, boy, it was talk of the town. I mean, in muster, you have a daily briefing. Well, so-and-so caught this guy last night and he's a real dirtbag. And So those are the ones that are spotlighted. So as a new agent, I'm kind of thinking, wow, we're doing a great thing. We're keeping all these bad guys out of the country. But and things were pretty slow when I first got there, so I didn't have a whole lot. It wasn't like I was just rounding up people every day. I mean, there would be several days or weeks sometimes that I wouldn't catch anybody. So I kind of just fell into this. Well, that's who we're getting. But as time went on, I'd catch people and they would just be like, I mean, I used to work construction before I worked in the Border Patrol. So, there was a fair amount of laborers that I worked with that these guys that I was catching just seemed to look like those guys. They weren't, they were ashamed that they were caught. They weren't like, they didn't fight back. Not to say that there was nobody ever fought back, but most of these guys were just like, yeah, you got me, but they didn't seem dangerous. And then we'd take them back and they didn't have any criminal history or they didn't have anything like that. So it started, that facade of, we're going out and getting the bad guys, that started to kind of fade away after a couple of years.
In that 6 months of training, so one of the things that we see videos, you can find videos all over YouTube of people getting stopped, recording their stops with Border Patrol. And we, as like our criminal justice people, talk about like these are your rights in these situations, and that these people routinely, in these videos, like routinely are, am I being detained? Well, you're not really being detained, but I'm not going to let you go. Like how much of that, like, I guess, how much training in the constitutional rights, the legal issues, do you get as a Border Patrol agent? And so how much of that behavior, to the extent that behavior is representative, is the result of them not knowing the constitutional rights of the people that they're stopping, or just them kind of not caring?
And we should make a distinction here between the internal checkpoints that CBP runs, which essentially are set up on usually major roads, although not entirely, and then essentially the other kind of roving patrolling, essentially, that you all engage in. And that's the roving patrolling is pretty much what you did, right, when you were out there?
Right. We our sector had a checkpoint, but we didn't man it at Yuma Station. That was the next station over. So as far as training at the academy, we had a course. It was several weeks in length, but it was taught by a lawyer called Applied Authorities. So we essentially went through the Fuerte and all the big Supreme Court cases surrounding Fourth Amendment and seizure and things like that. And so we were given training, and I was actually, I was fairly libertarian minded going into the Border Patrol. So hearing that they put a pretty good emphasis on working within the confines of the Fourth Amendment protections was kind of gave me a warm fuzzy that made me feel good that was at least a focus. At the same time, they pointed out that there's absolutely nothing wrong with assuming that the public doesn't have any idea what their rights are and working from that perspective.
So you're doing this. You'd come in with a kind of conception of what the border looked like, presumably. Because you lived in the United States and heard of the arguments about immigration and so on. Mm-hmm. Did it, aside from, the people you're meeting look more like construction workers than the criminals that were high profile. Like, did it match your expectations, or did it? You had certain views on immigration going in. Were those views kind of confirmed or pushed back on?
So I think in the beginning it was confirmed. So at the academy we learn immigration law, naturalization law, and we learn all the kind of the pathways in. And so for immigration law, there's a ton of visa categories. So on paper, it looks like, man, there's all these ways to come in the right way and do it legally, and why don't these people just do it? So going out and actually performing the work, I was coming at it from that perspective, but kind of going out and doing a little bit of research on my own, and then hearing from other people that no, that's not actually the case, that most of those pathways just aren't open, whether it be I mean, one barrier to entry is that not everybody that is coming across looking for work is even necessarily able to read and write that well. So how are you going to fill out tons of government forms without that ability, for one? And for the major thing is that there's national caps on everybody, and the same caps apply to Mexico and Guatemala as they do to somewhere in the Netherlands, where there's really no need for immigration from the Netherlands.
And this issue of caps and numerical limits and all the rest of that, was that discussed in the 6 months that you were there at the academy and training and all the rest of that?
God, never.
Yeah.
Never.
So nothing.
No. So there, there's that kind of echo chamber effect of, well, we're going to teach you all of the reasons why what these people are doing is really bad, and they should just do it this right way. But if you start to look around a little bit, you start to find out that right way just doesn't exist, at least not in any realistic way.
And when you spoke earlier about kind of the Fourth Amendment framing, this idea that there is essentially a way to kind of convince people that they really, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I got the impression that at the academy they were trying to get you guys to basically think that, yeah, the Fourth Amendment is great and there's this theory of law essentially, but most people are going to be willing to go along with this, and you guys should be aggressive in asserting your authority. Was that kind of the mentality essentially that was conveyed to folks in the class?
Yeah, I mean, they said, well, always, no matter what you're doing, ask for consent to search, because they'll probably give it to you. And so, probably most people don't think that, well, I've got nothing to hide, but it's just. And the other thing that it didn't really dawn on me then, but later on, Miranda rights, like, explicitly say they can and will be used against you. There's no point in the Miranda rights where they say, well, but if it turns out you weren't doing anything wrong, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt and stick up for you. No, it says will be used against you. So just my message to the public, like, there's no good reason to talk to law enforcement.
Were you there during the child separation stuff?
Yes. And that actually, really the influx of the families and children coming started in about 2014. So that was under the Obama administration. And during that time, really the only time that we separated families was if we established that the child was traveling with somebody other than their parent. So it's not considered a family if it's a brother or an uncle or something like that. So it has to be a parent. Also, if the parent had previously been removed or deported, or if they were, some sort of criminal alien that, they had a criminal past already, and it was deemed that the parent was a danger to the child of some sort. So those were the grounds for separation under the Obama administration. And then as I was on my way out, zero tolerance from the Trump administration was put into place. And it was very short-lived, but it was ugly while it was there.
What did your colleagues think of that? What was the reaction from inside to that change in policy? Probably
best described as a lot of shoulder shrugging. Like, nobody really thought it was a good idea, but it was like, let's see if it works. Their main focus was there was a flood of people coming in, but Yuma was, I think, the second busiest for family units and unaccompanied minors, second to the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. So we were just inundated with this new thing that we were not used to. So I think some people kind of thought, well, this is a little bit cruel, but if it works, it works. But when it went away, everybody was like, yeah, we were pretty sure that wasn't going to work.
How did you then, the process of, you go in, and so it sounds like there were some things that were different or maybe a little bit, you weren't super happy with, but you went in by and large agreeing with the mission and thinking this was a valuable thing and that this is what you wanted to do. How did that start to change?
So I would say probably around 2016. So I'd been doing the work for about 4 years. I'd been in for about 5 at that point. Honestly, it started out as just a gut reaction, like a gut level instinct where I still kind of enjoyed the chase. Like it's, I mean, it sounds a little cruel now, but like it was fun. I mean, you have to really use your critical reasoning skills and your deduction, and because they'll try tricky things. They'll try walking backwards, or they'll try, stepping on places where they don't think you'll be able to pick up their print. So it was, I mean, the chase was fun, but then the apprehension stopped being fun. It's because just the majority of the time it was some guy who had totally understood where he was coming from. Like, he just wants to come work. He just wants something better for himself or his family, or he wants to come and reunite with a family or whatever. I mean, that was really the majority of what I saw. And it just didn't feel good to be, putting my hands on somebody like that and taking away their freedom and putting them in the back of my truck to take them back to lock them up somewhere else. Like, that just didn't. So it started as a gut reaction.
And do you think it kind of coincided with your becoming a father too?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I became a father in 2013, and it's having kids just, I was a soldier before, and it's really easy to look at others as enemies or, opponents or, something else. But man, having kids, it really equalizes things. And you're like, man, everybody starts out here in this helpless state, and everybody's just a person. And it sounds kind of, saying it now, it sounds foolish, but it's like, yeah, we're dealing with people. These aren't, you can give them all the titles you want, immigrant, caravan, or, alien, or whatever. You can call them anything you want, but they're people. They're absolutely just people. And people try to do what's best for themselves. And that's what these guys are doing.
And so you started getting this sense, but how did you get from that growing dissatisfaction or distaste for it to eventually deciding to leave? Because that's a big step to quit your job and your career.
So my favorite thing to do while patrolling the border was audiobooks and podcasts. And I've been libertarian minded for the most part, as long as I can remember. But I always had these carve out for like our foreign policy and our immigration policy, because those were the things that I knew. And so I carved them out in my mind, and I thought, man, I don't know why libertarians have this big problem with these things. We just got to enforce these laws, or we just got to protect the country and this stuff. So, but I wanted to understand it better. So I started, moving my podcast listening from kind of entertainment driven, where I was just listening to funny stuff and interviews with entertaining people. And I started listening to more libertarian based stuff and listening to more.
So shows with really unentertaining people.
Entertaining in a different way, I guess. But more cerebral, more idea driven. And I guess I just started challenging myself. And so Thad Russell, his unregistered podcast was, I think, really instrumental in challenging what I saw as norms. And it's an excellent podcast if you like being uncomfortable with things that you kind of hold to be true. That's a good one to listen to. I did bump into the Free Thoughts podcast from time to time, and the Reason podcast as well. I just started going everywhere and trying to figure out, what is it about this immigration thing that these libertarians have such a problem with. So I ended up going to one of Thad Russell's weekend events, and I got an opportunity to talk to him, and I was like, I don't get this open borders thing. Like, how the hell does that work? How does it? I don't get it. he's like, well, I support it, but I'm not the expert. So go check out, if you're really interested, go check out Bryan Caplan. So I went back to work that next day and downloaded a bunch of Bryan Caplan podcasts and YouTube videos. And I'm sitting in my truck at work on the border, near the Colorado River, and listening to Bryan Caplan. And I'm like, oh, this explains all those gut reactions. Like, this thing that I'm doing is a little bit ugly. Wow. So, it was something inside of me told me, like, this thing that you're doing isn't right. But it did take, a little bit of soul searching, a little bit of economic argument to really push it over the edge. And so that would have been, that probably would have been mid 2017. So I didn't quit until August 2018. So I had realized, well, I don't like what I'm doing, but at the same time, I had bought a house, I had a mortgage payment, I had, twin toddler boys to take care of. I'd started this whole life basically built around this career, thinking that I was going to be there forever, retire, and live happily ever after. So there in mid 2017, it really hit me like, I can't keep doing this. But what the hell else am I going to do? So I let my wife in on the secret and let her know that which is, kind of a shock, but she was supportive after she realized, after I explained to her why I didn't want to keep doing this.
What, to the extent that you feel comfortable, what was her initial reaction when you said, I've really been, kind of tortured by this. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I'm just like, really, I don't think I can keep doing this. How did that all go down?
I think I just started with, hey, sweetie, I don't think I can keep doing this. And I just started with that and she was, it was like confusion. Like, yeah, I hadn't really been talking to her about any of my doubts or anything, like, because I was confused by them too. So I hadn't really been, talking with this whole time I've been going through this catharsis, if you will. It's been inside my head. So this was pretty much the first she'd been hearing about it. And once I explained that, it just seemed like it was wrong, and that, treating people this way and being a part of this, she's like, yeah, to be honest, it always kind of bugged me the way that you talked about your work and the way that you portrayed these people as, bad guys and this and that. I was like, oh, well, thanks for, I guess, sitting on it this whole time. But, I'm glad. So she was supportive, and she was, it was definitely a shock as far as financially goes. And then I don't know if we want to go into this, but so jumping forward to 2018, my wife worked for Backpage.com. In March of 2018, I had decided, I'm done. We were just kind of getting the logistics together of, okay, can she go, because she was able to work remotely for her work. So we thought, well, we can rely on her income for now, and I'll figure it out along the way. Well, in March, I'm getting ready for work, and I worked evenings, so I was fixing my meals for the night. She comes in and says, the FBI just raided the Dallas office. And I was like, are they coming here? She said, that's what I'm trying to figure out. So I called into work and said, family emergency, I'm going to be late at least. I may need to stay home. And she talked to her lawyer, and she wasn't indicted or on the indicted list. So we thought pretty sure that, they weren't coming. And so we didn't have anything to worry about. So I ended up going to work, and then within a week, the FBI had seized Backpage, and she was out of a job. So this plan that we had in place that we were going to rely on her income just blew out the window. So I had been dragging my feet about quitting, because I was just like, I liked the guys that I worked with generally, and I God, the money was great. The benefits were great. And retirement would have been great.
And now you had to drag your feet a little bit.
Well, I was
Right.
glad that I did drag my feet because then at least we still had one income for now.
Right.
So eventually, my kids were getting to be of school age, and we didn't want to kind of involve them in my decision making or my choices. So she decided to take the boys and move back to the Phoenix area, so she could get them set up in school. And that was about when my feet dragging stopped, because I was, I didn't want to be doing the work anymore. But it was finally when my family was gone, and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna go start this life. Are you gonna come join us?" So, in August, I finally walked in, and it wasn't even I wasn't even at the beginning, because you usually start the shift off pretty busy. And then about halfway through the shift, I walked in to see my supervisor, and I said, "Hey, how do you resign? What do I need to do?" He's like, "I don't know. Nobody really quits." So I said, "Okay, well, can you find that out for me?" Because he's like, "What's up?" I was like, just not really into it anymore." Just kind of left it vague. And he said, "Okay, well, I'll let you know what I find out." And then by the end of the shift, by about midnight, I got a phone call, and it was a higher supervisor, and he said, "What the hell's going on? What is this?" I said, "Same thing. Just I've kind of changed my mind. I'm not into it anymore." He's like, "Well, how soon do you want to go?" I said, the sooner the better." And that next day, I turned everything in, out processed.
I mean, so you kept it vague with your reasons. You kept vague with your supervisor and the higher up supervisor. But did you discuss your reasons with any of your colleagues?
Not terribly explicitly. Now, I would, I like kind of making people figure things out for themselves. I would make comments kind of here and there about, well, this doesn't really make any sense. Well, why are we doing this? Oh, because we've always done it this way. That's, so I would take these little pot shots at what we were doing and just kind of see what people's reactions were. But no, I didn't really. I mean, up until right at the very end, I just kind of kept it to myself.
We have talked on Free Thoughts before. We've done a handful of episodes on the question of state authority and the role of the citizen, and when is it permissible for a citizen or obligatory for a citizen to disobey government agent, a law, regulation, and so on. But it's always from the perspective of the citizen being confronted by someone like you were, and how do I respond to that? But you, your story is from the other side of it, as someone who's being paid to execute the laws of the land. And so I'm curious your thoughts on kind of the moral calculus of that, because and we get at this a lot, that's one of the common refrains in the immigration debate is, if you don't like the laws, change them. Mm-hmm. But we have to enforce what's on the books. And I don't like what's on the books, and I think we should let more people in, but we got to enforce what's on the books. And then once we've done that, then we can talk about reform. And so this, someone could say to you, you signed up for this job. This is the law of the United States. We, our entire system depends upon people enforcing these laws. If everyone disobeys them, then it's chaos. Or if no one is willing to enforce them, then they might as well not exist. And so that you have, kind of like a patriotic duty to America to enforce her laws, even if you might not agree with all of them. Does that argument carry any weight, or how would you respond to that argument for people who are maybe similarly situated to the way that you were?
Now, are you talking subversion, keeping the job? And
no, I mean, although that's an interesting you could have not quit and just used your time on the job to not catch people, or alert people or do other things to subvert it.
Right.
But that's another
Which a lot
level
of people told me I should have done.
Yeah.
No, and believe me, the thoughts crossed my mind. Like it seemed like, but I also didn't want to end up with, some charge against me or anything like that.
Well, and that's always the issue, right? I mean, because when you're on the inside, and I spent a long time in government, in the executive branch, and there is a mentality that goes along with it. I can only speak for my CIA experience, but I don't think it's unique in that when you begin to internally rock the boat enough, then you are no longer a quote team player.
Right.
And so this is when you begin to kind of get into the initial retaliatory phase. You begin, maybe in your case, you'd start to get some really lousy shifts. Maybe some other things would have happened. And then over time, more than likely, it would have just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And so you would have put yourself through all that kind of stuff. And kind of in the big scheme of things, it would have made it even more difficult for you and your family. And in terms of being able to at least walk away with the ability to say that, you had a good record when you were a Border Patrol agent, mm-hmm. that would have potentially been compromised. So did any of that kind of thing, go through your mind as you were kind of weighing all this?
Oh, absolutely. But what it boiled down to was, I took an oath. I took the oath seriously, and it seemed where I do believe that, there are cases where subversion is necessary, and it's been shown that, well, obviously the state legalization has shown that it can change public the state legalization of marijuana is obviously subverting, supposed federal power that they think they wield. And that's clearly been shown to change public perception. And now we look at, marijuana laws in a completely different way. And it's just a matter of time now before the whole thing crumbles.
Right. Just like citizen subversion was the reason states started legalizing it is because everyone there was already violating those laws.
Right. So there's a place for that. But I think a private citizen doing something and a government agent who, I did take that oath seriously. And I did, whether I was tempted to kind of, turn my head at some point, I've told myself I wouldn't do that. And I didn't want to leave on those terms. To your original question, I don't think there's any patriotic duty to continue enforcing laws that you find distasteful or immoral. Back to the drug laws again, I would love to see a flood of law enforcement personnel just quitting because they realize, I'm taking fathers and mothers away from families, or I'm taking children away from fathers and mothers for a substance that people can freely choose to use or not. You can make arguments for different areas of policing, but the drugs is pretty cut and dry that it's a personal choice. And to take somebody, family is very, very important to me. And to take somebody away from their family for something so stupid, and immigration, it comes back to that. We're breaking up families for walking across a line, for walking across some line in the sand that we've decided is a trespassing, a do not enter.
Well, what I found interesting is that you were not the only person in 2018 at DHS to walk away over this particular policy. Did you ever hear of a guy by the name of Scott Schuchart?
No.
So he was a fairly senior official in DHS's Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. And he had the direct responsibility for advising the chief civil rights and civil liberties officer on these very kinds of issues. And he walked away pretty publicly in, I believe it was the fall of 2018. And in December 2018, he had a conversation with some of our friends over at the Project on Government Oversight, which, as our listeners may know, is one of the premier organizations representing whistleblowers. And I just want to read a quick paragraph here about what he said to Pogo about this whole issue of family separation. I want to kind of get your reaction to it. This is what Scott said. What was different to me about family separation was that it was a deliberate human rights violation that senior members of the administration wanted to undertake, where the fact that it was harmful to its victims was not some byproduct that better government policy could minimize, but rather where doing harm was the point. Like use of military force, the idea of separating families was to use the fact of child trauma to change their parents' behavior. I thought that was illegal, contrary to treaties and to the substantive due process prong of the Fifth Amendment, un-American, and seriously wrong. When I understood that CRCL was not institutionally strong enough to make any difference even in the face of such serious civil and human rights problems, I had to think very hard about whether it was a place that I should be spending any more of my life. After the family separation issue played out a little farther, I came to feel that, while many people in CRCL do wonderful work and absolutely should not feel ethically compelled to leave, that my job, working directly for the political leadership to set her agenda and implement her priorities, was not possible to do constitutionally in this administration.
So I sympathize with that. It's been tough for me personally. I mean, so the family separation officially went into effect right after my wife had lost her job. So it was a selfish decision. And I've looked back and wondered if I made the right one sitting by, because I did. When I decided I didn't really want to do this work anymore, what I started doing was volunteering for processing duties, which is kind of a crap duty. Nobody wants to do it. But I volunteered for it because at least I wasn't out. You know, these people were already apprehended. I wasn't the one putting my hands on them and taking away their freedom. I was just doing the paperwork for somebody else that had done it. And in my mind, you know, that rationalized out somehow. But so I was back in the processing area on a regular basis, watching. That's where the separations happen. And it was hard to watch, and it was hard to not do anything about. There's a part of me that regrets that I didn't just quit right then and make a bigger statement out of that. But I didn't. I chose I chose self-interest.
Yeah, well, but it's also about survival too.
Right.
And so, you know, when my wife and I did our thing, it seems like a lifetime ago. It's been over 20 years ago. We had the luxury of doing it, because I was young and stupid, and a little bit kamikaze-like maybe about the whole thing. But we also didn't have kids, right? Mm-hmm. And we knew that, okay, if we have to sell the house, we can do that, which we ultimately did have to do. But that's the thing about it. I'm convinced that there are still a lot of people inside government at multiple levels, within the civil service primarily, who probably have had exactly, in many cases, the same thoughts, and maybe even some of the same impulses you've had. But because there is no safety net, essentially, to really protect people, you know, you don't have, like in the State Department, what's known as a dissent channel, mm-hmm. right? Where you can officially formally go and like file a protest and say, the department's policy in this area is completely wrong, we shouldn't be doing it, et cetera, et cetera. There is no safe zone, essentially, within CBP and DHS for guys like you or gals like Jen Dunn and others to do that kind of thing, right? And so that, to me, is like one of the things ultimately that has to be fixed internally. You know, if we're going to be able to have any kind of sane immigration policy, and we want to be able to recruit really good people and retain really good people to actually do some of the work that is necessary, we also need to give them the ability to have a voice and to be able to raise these kinds of issues to try to actually get policy changed. And so that's why, personally, you know, I wouldn't beat yourself up about that. I mean, the fact that you were willing ultimately to go ahead and leave, and the fact that you've been, you know, so public for so long, for so many months now, kind of talking about this, trying to raise awareness about it, there is an enormous public service in that.
And I'm learning more as I've been out, and I got you guys at Cato have been indispensable for your work on immigration. Like that was my other worry, was that I was going to get out and realize I'd made a huge mistake. But I've been following your guys' research, David Beer and Alex Nurasta and others, and I'm more convinced than ever that I did do the right thing. But yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me the go ahead that it was okay to stay during that difficult time.
You know, these are ultimately people who have not been through the whistleblowing experience. And that's essentially kind of what you were doing here. I mean, resignation process, whistleblowing, I really don't draw a lot of distinction. What Scott did, I don't draw a lot of distinctions there. And the thing that I try to tell people is becoming a person of conscience in government and electing to leave government because you have developed a conscience is a very, very personal decision, and everybody has to, kind of find their own way on this. This is why, I get very angry at people who, criticize Edward Snowden for what he did. I mean, Edward Snowden looked at what others who came before him went through, including a vicious, vindictive, and completely unjustified attempted prosecution of a former NSA official under the Espionage Act. These are the disincentives that are there for people in government who have a conscience, who want to try to make sure that we are doing the right thing, that our government is trying to do the right thing. But it is a very intensely personal decision, and everybody has got a particular point at which, they finally come to the conclusion that I just can't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. And it varies for every one of us who's ultimately done anything like this.
Have you heard from any of your Border Patrol colleagues since leaving? And since you became kind of public in your reasons for it?
Yeah, a few. Shortly after, so when Thad Russell interviewed me, I was also interviewed by ReasonTV, Zach Weissmuller, and that video made it. I don't know how, but it made it to. There are some, Border Patrol specific, like you have to be affiliated somehow to be a part of the Facebook group. One day I got home from work and I just got like 5 text messages in a row from different people, and they're like, I just saw your video. What the hell is this? What's going on? And one actually called me and he's like, hey, man, what is this? I had no idea you felt this way. I disagree, but it was a pleasure working with you. I still like you. But he was checking on me to see if I was okay because the comments to the video were just so awful. He's like, man, I didn't know if you saw those, but I just want to make sure you're doing okay. I haven't seen them, but I can use my imagination. I know how we like to talk back there, but so yeah, of the people that have actually contacted me, most people have said something to the effect of, "Hey, I disagree, but pleasure working with you. Nice knowing you." Couple of text chains that I used to be a part of just dried up and stopped getting text messages. But other than that, yeah, I think it rubbed some people the wrong way. But overall, I haven't had a bad reaction from my former coworkers.
Have you heard from anyone either that you knew or just still in Border Patrol generally who agrees with you or says kind of, I wish I could do the same thing?
There was one that emailed me and was like, didn't come out and say it, but he said something to the effect of like, yeah, I'm rooting for you or something that made me kind of think, well, there's a seed planted there as well. But
and I hope he didn't do that from a U.S. government address. I hope he used his personal account.
I'll have to go look, but hopefully.
You heard from one person who might be thinking the same kind of thoughts that you were before you quit, but I imagine there are others. In the Border Patrol, elsewhere in government, as Patrick has talked about. So those people who might be listening, who are kind of feeling the same things you were feeling, stuck in this place of my principles matter to me, my moral beliefs matter to me, but at the same time, this is a job. Changing is hard. costly. Also, I took an oath, or I, need to support my country. What would you say to those people now that you've experienced this, now that you've made this decision?
Well, it's tough because I can understand exactly why somebody would stay, even if they were wrestling with that. But I would just say, don't ignore it, explore it, explore it further. And that's for, Border Patrol, any law enforcement especially. I mean, if it doesn't feel good to arrest somebody for some marijuana or, a stupid prostitution charge or something like that, just don't ignore that. Think about it. Like, think long and hard about it. And maybe you don't have to quit, but maybe you can start speaking up in your role. And yeah, I mean, take as much risk as you feel you can. But just, don't ignore it. To the Border Patrol agents specifically, I didn't realize this this wasn't really a thought in my head when I was leaving, but since I'm gone, it really, so loosening immigration, at least for, a broader work permit program, would benefit them as Border Patrol agents immensely. And here's how. If there truly is some sort of threat, these supposed rapists and murderers, if those people are really there, or even, the mythical terrorists that seem to be, slipping through, if those people are really there, don't you want our Border Patrol agents focusing on them and not wasting their time with babysitting women and children, with locking up and sending to court people who just want to come here and change tires or roof houses or whatever? I don't care if they wanted to work in the trades or if they want to work up out of the trades. I don't care. But loosening up our restrictions benefits the Border Patrol more than they'll ever realize, because then if it's so much easier for people to come in legally, even if it's just to work, don't take residency and citizenship out of it. That makes their job so much more easy. And if there really is a threat, they're able to focus on that actual threat and not just sweep everybody together and paint everybody with a broad brush that, oh, you're a criminal. If walking across the line meant that you're more likely to commit other crimes, that's like saying, well, you sped on the highway today, so you're more likely to commit other crimes. Well, you jaywalked today, so you're more likely to commit other crimes. You're a danger. It's just not. It's not good logic. I would say if you're thinking about something like this and you're in the Border Patrol, maybe you don't have to do what I did and get out. Maybe you can and start talking to, maybe go into positions of leadership. I had no interest in going into management, but maybe somebody does, and they can go in and start changing internally. It's going to be a tough road, but if you're having those thoughts, think about them. Don't ignore them, and explore them further.
Thanks for listening. Free Thoughts is produced by Tess Terrible. If you enjoy Free Thoughts, please subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about libertarianism, visit us on the web at www.libertarianism.org.